getting back lost time with their children thanks to a new law. But what does lost time mean?
It should not cost, in Texas, a fit, willing, and able parent $700,000, 12 years in court, and over 43 false CPS allegations. I could have been jailed or imprisoned at any point. All allegations were false.
Some Texas fathers are helping us understand. Here's the story.
Robert Garza says his ex-wife used false accusations to keep their children away from him. Then in March this year, he testified in front of the Texas Senate as a dad and as a parental rights advocate.
I chose to come out with a bill called Time Taken, Time Back. It was in the Texas Senate, and it was SB 718.
This Texas law by Senator Angela Paxton will give non-custodial parents back lost time with their children, the same amount of time wrongfully taken away in divorce court orders. The law will take effect September 2023.
Hi, Robert, and welcome to the Anti-Alienation Project. Thank you so much for being here to share your story, your mission. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Well, thanks for having me.
Your law, Time Taken, Time Back, which I know you're working on now to get passed federally, is brilliant. And as a child who had time taken, 2 decades, in fact, I want to express how grateful I am to you that you've chosen to turn your pain into purpose, help other kids, and help other parents who are going through this.
Thank you.
So if you don't mind, could we start with the beginning of your story? How did this happen? When did this start?
So it started when my children were 1 and 3. I went through 43 false allegations. This spans over 12 years. I was quiet for about 10 years, not knowing what this was called, not knowing that this was like business as usual for court system, and that lawyers actually train their clients to do this to people. The problem is judges know that this is happening in their courtrooms and stuff, but they don't do anything about it because most of the time it's these lawyers that funded the judge to get elected, or the judge owes the lawyers favors, or there's backroom deals. You know, they're throwing parties for the judge's campaign. And that's what happened in mine. My ex's attorney happened to be the judge's largest campaign contributor and threw parties to get that judge elected.
Wow. So there are huge conflict of interests that are keeping the best interests of the child and not being met because of these conflict of interest. And do you think it's mostly about money?
It's all about money. After seeing this and realizing what happened to me, a lot of parents take it personal. You know, we have a support group that we have parents come in and they're just starting this journey. I wish I would have had somebody tell me these things, you know, that this is just business as usual. You're just another number. You know, it's really sad. You go through this process. It's even more sad that the children go through this process, someone like you, because had your father knew this in the first place, it probably would have helped him cope with some of the stuff, that it wasn't personal. And I hope that people understand it's not. It's all about money. It's all about, you know, once you get in the system and you can't resolve it, most people won't resolve it. It's either you give up everything or they'll try to take it. It's money all the way around. And usually it's the court system, the judges that give out these home studies, psych evals, and everybody. It's not random people. In fact, we're getting those records right now for people in our district on judges that are recommending these psych evals, these home studies, and these amicus attorneys, and actually putting them together to show that it's favoritism. It's their friends that are commenting on their Facebooks, their people that they're playing golf with. They're giving them this business.
They're colluding.
Correct.
Wow. Okay. We have so much to get into with the court system. Do you mind if we go back to the beginning of your story from when the very first false accusation was made? Do you remember your response? How you felt, what that was like?
I do. In fact, when you ask me that question, I can still feel it. And I'm sure everybody can. I'm sure if you ask your dad the same thing. At first, you don't believe it. You think it's a joke. I was like, okay, what's going on? And then on top of it, when it finally does hit you, you don't think that it's your ex doing it, because you're like, how could this person that I was married to for all these years be doing this. And I was just over there literally 2 days before, and then now all of a sudden I have police at my door serving me with protective orders, restraining orders. But once you, sorry, it just like hits you. But once you realize that it is happening and it is real, you go through a whole roller coaster of emotions: why, what, when, where, how. Then the effects, the paranoia. I mean, it's just a roller coaster ride. And that's what most people don't understand is if it's that way for a grown up that can handle this, what's it like for a child that can't handle it? And a lot of people don't understand this. It's not like you're going to grandma's or your mother's house for the weekend. To a father that is going through this, it literally feels like you're grieving the loss of a living child. And it's that type of hurt, grief, pain, all at once. And as a child, I don't even know how children cope with it. And that if it happens long enough, then what happens to a child, from my understanding, after about 30 days, they lose hope of anything. And then when they lose hope, then they kind of give in to the alienator that's doing this. They're in survival mode. And then on top of it, if you're in that survival mode, that child is going, all their hormones while they're growing up is experiencing this type of grief, this type of emotion and everything else. Even us as grown-ups can't cope with that.
I know. Thank you for sharing that. As you talk about it, I mean, that's exactly, it was probably about 30 days for me that my dad had the restraining order. In that time, it was completely solidified. Were you aware that something like this could happen?
No, absolutely not. My lawyer didn't tell me anything about it. In fact, when this happened, I went and got the biggest law firm that I could find and just went at it. Within 2 weeks, I already had spent $30,000 and didn't look like there was any resolution. And my lawyer at that time, he's like, look, he didn't explain that it was a game. He said, look, you're going to be going through this for a while. It's going to burn through all your assets and all your money. Your ex seems like she has endless funds. So I'm going to suggest another lawyer for you. I was so mad at him because this is one of the biggest law firms, right? And now I understand how he was actually helping me by not proceeding with my case.
If you had known about silver bullet techniques and false accusations during a custody dispute, if you were aware of these things, do you think that would have made a difference in your response?
No.
Okay.
Because they're my children.
Yeah.
And
fair enough.
You know, a lot of people will go spend hundreds of $1,000s on a house or, you know, a car. The most important thing that they can spend it on is their house or assets or whatever. Nothing mattered more to me than my children. Even when we started this, my ex had offered me money. They sent a message to my attorney, asked me how much to walk away, and my attorney responded, "You must not understand the love that my client has for his children." So,
what a great dad. That's amazing. I'm sure your children, if they haven't thanked you already, will definitely thank you a million times one day.
So mine right now are 14 and 17. And so even at that age, even though they know that this has happened, I don't think they'll understand the effects of it until they're literally about probably 25 years old, the same age.
Sure. So as we move forward in our conversation, I think it might be helpful if you could define for people listening gatekeeping and bad mouthing and any other terms that you think would be relevant for targeted parents out there to know.
Yeah. So there's a difference between gatekeeping, parental alienation, and bad mouthing. A lot of people intertwine all those in with parental alienation, and it's an overused term. They should never really use that term a lot. That term is only used if your child is rejecting you. So yes, there are bad behaviors. There are gatekeeping where your ex is keeping the kids away from you, stuff like that. But don't use parental alienation. Parental alienation is only if if the child's rejecting you. Gatekeeping is when your ex is keeping your child away from you. And that's what gatekeeping is. So call the terms what they are.
Okay. If you have a parent who has done nothing wrong and they discover that there's been a false allegation made against them, like in your case, given that you've had the experience, what would you advise targeted parents to do straight away in that situation?
You need to do some research, first of all. We have a support group, Dad Talk Today support group. You can go in there and you can see some videos that we've made, stuff like that. The first thing that you need to have your attorney understand is that there were no allegations before the divorce. There was no police involvement, no CPS involvement. And because of that, that will make the court understand right away that this is a false accusation.
Okay, so courts are aware that false accusations are made quite often?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
And especially if it's right by like Thanksgiving, New Year's, or mostly it's Thanksgiving and Christmas, or before spring break, like right before, that's called holiday hijacking. They're doing it on purpose. That way they're going to hijack that big block of time, and that will give them enough time to alienate that child, especially if they do it right before Thanksgiving, because they'll hijack your Thanksgiving, your Christmas, your New Year's. It will probably be around Valentine's Day before you end up getting a court date, or after. So they just took almost 3 months from you with one accusation.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the judge has to give the children the custody to the parent that makes the allegation as a precautionary measure?
Correct. So the court really can't do it because they're violating your 14th Amendment right. You do have care, custody, and control of your child. You also have you're innocent until proven guilty. So they're violating so many things on a precaution. Now, you can fight it all you want, but they're going to do it. And until we get the laws changed, it's against the law now to violate your amendment rights anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a few things that we're getting changed right now on a national level that will hopefully help that.
Amazing, because that needs to change. Going back to your story, your lawyer sends you over to a new lawyer. What steps did you then take to fight all of these false allegations as they came in?
I didn't know it was going to be 43. The first one that came out was that I was starving and dehydrating my daughters. They were 1 and 3. There's no way. My daughters have seen pediatricians their whole lives. They've seen doctors, everything. Like, they've had their shots on time. They've had everything. So I thought, okay, we just need to go through this and we'll be good. So they served us with temporary orders. I agreed to them because I was like, okay, well, they name them temporary. Temporary orders are not temporary. And I'm going to tell you again, temporary orders are not temporary. And if you leave them the way that they are, they're actually your final order, because even after you prove the allegation is false, you actually have to go in to dissolve those temporary orders to reinstate your order as it was before. Does that make sense?
It does, and it doesn't. Are people aware of this?
No. In fact, I thought temporary orders were once you go through this and they find it was a false accusation, that you would just get your kids back. Mm-hmm. You took them just as fast, you're going to give them back as fast, right? No, it doesn't work that way. So let's just say that you just got your kids taken away right now. CPS is going to do an investigation. It'll take 30 to 45 days to investigate. Then they're going to have to come out with, that it's ruled out. Then they're going to snail mail that to you. That's going to be another several days. So you're literally looking at almost 2 months before you get something from CPS saying that it was ruled out. At that point, you have to give it to your attorney. There's no use of getting another court date in there because you're just spending $3,000 to $4,000 to get a hearing for the judge to tell you that because there's an open CPS investigation, there's nothing they're going to do until it's closed.
Do you think it's a problem that false accusations can be made without any evidence and be taken seriously?
Yes. If the courts would just prosecute for perjury, it's right now a law. There's no other laws that you have to do. If you will just do perjury, it's a state jail felony in every state. If the district attorney's office will just prosecute for that, probably 90% of this would just go away.
So in your case, when the allegations were found to be false, why didn't they prosecute for perjury?
So in my case, she was on the stand, my attorney asked her, he's like, so out of all these allegations, how many did you report to CPS? She was like, none. Started smiling. And I'm like, what? Now, this is another thing that people should know. You cannot get unredacted CPS report yourself. Even if you subpoena it, your attorney, you're going to spend money. It's going to be redacted. So you're not going to see who made the allegation. You're going to see what the allegation said, but you're going to find that out anyway when they ask you the questions. So getting that report and spending the money is not going to help you. The only way to get that report unredacted is two ways. A judge can get the report unredacted, and so can a home study.
Was it someone else making the allegations, or are you not allowed to talk about that?
No, I can talk about it. Attorneys train their clients to do this. At first, she went to her therapist and said that I was starving, dehydrating the kids. And then the therapist made a CPS report that day. That next morning, she was in the courtroom with her attorney getting an emergency protective order restraining order based on an open CPS investigation. We didn't know what was going on. The court's blind to it because they don't know what's going on. The only person that knew what she did was her therapist, and her attorney. Everyone else was blind to this. Now, the only reason I know that first report came from there was because we subpoenaed her therapy records also. So when we subpoenaed her therapy records, the date was in there to show what she did. Then it showed on the CPS records what time the call came in, and we subpoenaed those two through the social study. But that wasn't several months. That was until way later. I'm talking about years later by the time we got those records. But this whole time, we were just blind to who made the report and everything else. But now we found out that all she did was go to mandatory reporters, made the allegation. Once the mandatory reporter made that report, she would run to the court and get a protective order, restraining order, screaming that there was an open CPS investigation when it originally came from her or one of her team.
Right. Did she do that to kind of give herself a layer of protection so that she wouldn't be charged with perjury?
Correct. And she wouldn't be sued. So if you think about it, you can sue someone for defamation, for slander, for all these other things. The way she did it, she went to mandatory reporters to do the dirty work, is that she gave herself a layer of protection, like you said, and she did it by proxy. If you ever go through this, you need to let the court know that this was done by proxy. They will automatically understand how this was done. I didn't know any of these words, these terms, or anything, but they're used to it. If you start using these terms like bad-mouthing, gatekeeping, allegations by proxy, or any of these other ones, then they'll understand very quickly that you know what you're talking about.
Right. And just for anybody who listens to this episode, most people probably know that the silver bullet tactic, gatekeeping, withholding the kids, all of this is not as rare as you would want it to believe it is. It's actually very common. In fact, this is what people who are familiar with my story know, that this is what happened to my dad 20 years ago. So Robert, why do you think that this is still allowed to happen 20 years later?
So it's a big money generator for sure. I can go into, the state making money on child support, Title 4D funds maximizing child support in every state. But if you look at it, it is all a money generating machine. But where parents need to understand and get together, and I'm glad that we're living in the age that we are now, because, I don't know what would have happened when your dad was going through it. There was no internet or anything like that. I wouldn't assume that he could go on there and find other people like us or advocates that could say, this is nothing personal, it's the machine. And so when you look at it that way, your only object to do is to spend as much time as you can, whether it's supervised visits. If you're thrown into that, just get supervised visits. Please go to all your supervision and everything else. Don't just not go. Then they'll end up taking your kids completely away from you, even though you don't have enough money for supervision or anything like that. But just don't walk away. Like, absolutely not.
I just hear so many negative things about family court, especially how about the profit exploitation. What is working about family court? It seems like it's causing more harm than good.
It was never meant to be that way. I think they saw the money in it, and it was meant to solve problems. I can show you two different sides of an argument on, let's just say, a new law. There's one that's called child support upon conception. Now, because of all the new laws with Roe versus Wade, that there's no abortion now in Texas, then the Texas legislator is like, okay, we're going to have to take care of all these kids, so let's just make the fathers liable for them. I said, what you're looking for is child support upon birth, because what that law was trying to do in Texas was that as soon as, let's just say, a teenager found out they were pregnant in high school, 6 months pregnant, then the attorney general steps in at that point. They automatically get that child on child support and retro child support. So let's just say they owe $500 a month. They put them on child support immediately. Now they owe $500 a month for 6 months. And if they have 30 days to pay the back child support, if they don't pay it, that person in high school automatically goes to jail because they're owed back child support. That is going to run our children's credit. It's going to run their future, because automatically they get put on criminal, they have a criminal record coming out of high school. They have no credit. Now they have really bad credit because that goes on their credit score. They're literally going to run our children's lives before it even starts. And when I said that, they were like, oh my gosh, we didn't even think of that. They killed the bill at the last minute, so it never got passed. But I was like, you're looking at child support maybe upon birth rather than conception, for those reasons, if you're going to do something like this.
Wow, it seems like they swung too far in the other direction.
Correct. But that's what I was saying. So they mean well, right? By like, and that's how I think the court system was made. They meant well, but now that they didn't think about all this other stuff, now there's too much money involved in them to stop the wheel, that it's just generating money like crazy. In fact, if you think about it and you watch or look at statistics on how much attorneys got paid 20 years ago to now, you're going to see just it goes straight up. It doesn't even there's no curve like this. It's just going like this. And that's why, because as soon as you get divorced, it's instant fighting because of false allegations, because they know there's not been one person in 15 years in the US in family court that has gone to jail for perjury or been fined. Criminal court is different than family court. Not one person are you going to find in family court that has got sentenced for perjury. And that's why they allow it.
That is, oh my goodness.
Correct.
Since I've been learning more and more about this, I've thought, why are, abuse allegations, neglect, why are these allegations being handled in family court? Why aren't they being handled in criminal court, where you're supposed to have evidence and you're innocent, you truly are innocent until proven guilty?
Right.
Do you think that that the allegations should be handled, that kind of abuse allegations, neglect, should that be in criminal court so that you have to provide evidence and maybe there's a jury or a due process?
I think whatever you call it, whether it's family court or criminal court, they shouldn't be able to impede on your parental rights or even your amendment right. I mean, if you were to do this in criminal court, they wouldn't even have it. So I think criminal court has been around longer than family court. And so family court, they're just putting people in those seats, and whatever goes and they allow, then it's fine. I think the first 4 of my allegations were starving, dehydrating. So when they couldn't do that, and think about it, my children are 1 and 3. That's easy to prove if they're starving or dehydrating because they can do tests on them. They went straight to molesting and stuff like that. At that point, CPS is not the only person investigating you. It's also the district attorney's office in those counties that supposedly it happened in. So now you have now you need a criminal attorney as well as a family court attorney, and you're being investigated by all these agencies. And in my case, that was one of the biggest travesties, that why I did the bill too, was because there's no prosecution for perjury. With these false allegations, it's taking resources away from children really being hurt. It's taking resources away from CPS, the district attorney's office. It's stopping up the family court system. And so that's why I came back with the time taken, time back, to deter that behavior and give those resources back to CPS, the district attorney's office, and to the court system.
That's a really good point. It's a waste of manpower, of services. So many people who would go through these false allegations would probably give up, maybe even after one false accusation. I mean, I know when my dad went through the silver bullet, his attorney said, don't even go to court. Like, they're already painted you out as this guy. You won't stand a chance. So he didn't even go to family. He didn't do what you did. What made you decide to keep going? And was there ever a point where you felt like you wanted to give up?
Yes. There was a lot of times that I thought about giving up, not only because my resources were gone or anything else, but because I was just so beat that I jumped through all these hoops so many times. Where's my protection? Where's my kids' protection and all this? I've already went through all your hoops. And then on top of those hoops, they're like, well, let's get a home study in there just to see what's going on. My attorney would be like, yeah, after this, it'll be fine. Then here came the psych eval. Then here came the amicus attorney. Then I thought, okay, I've jumped through all these hoops. There's nothing they found. It's all been ruled out. I went through the psych eval, the home study. Now let's get to final trial. As soon as I try to get to final trial, another allegation would come up. Then we would be within 2 weeks away from final trial. Then another allegation. And then so they would have to wait 2 more months for that one to go through, because there was no use, like I told you, to get to court. Because even if I would have went to final trial, if there was an open CPS investigation, you couldn't get to final trial because the judge would postpone it anyway, because there was something open. There can't be any investigations open or there's no reason of going to court. So then when that got rolled out, I was like, okay, final trial again. We booked it. Then we got to court. The judge is like, well, opposing counsel brought up, well, Judge, Texas rules are that you had to have a updated home study within 6 months to go to final trial, and we don't have that. So we need to do an update. Oh my gosh. So then we had to update the home study, update the psych eval. The psych eval the first time took only maybe 4 months, somewhere around there, to do. The second psych eval, just the update with the same person, took 1.5 years. Now, the person that did the psych eval for us happened to be the same person that went to school with my ex's attorney. They went to school together.
Did you know this at the time?
No.
So that would be a conflict of interest, right?
That would be a huge conflict of interest. But then you have the judge recommending the psych eval person when it's a big triangle. But I didn't figure this out until the end. And then I put all the pieces together. It's almost like a puzzle that you're fitting all these pieces in, and you can kind of see a picture, but you don't want to make an accusation. And then when you put that last piece in, it all makes sense. So when you see that it was my ex's attorney that got the judge elected, then you see it was the judge that recommended the psych eval person, which happened to be the same person that went to school with her attorney. And they were roommates in college, by the way. I don't mean school like preschool or high school. I'm talking about college, law school, psych school.
Wow. And the allegations were still proven false.
Correct.
So a whole lot of work for nothing. I am so sorry. That's incredibly corrupt that could happen. If this is too sensitive of a question, I would understand if you don't want to talk about this. But I am wondering, as a child who went through parental alienation, if you noticed any effects that this had on your kids and your your relationship with them.
Yes. At first, when we were going through supervised visitation, I would go in there and say that, they would ask who this person is. And I'm like, oh, they're just, somebody that's here to, kind of watch us, not a big deal. And again, they were 1 in 3, right? So they didn't really question too much. They just were more focused on wanting to play games or whatever else. When you're in supervised visitation, you can't even hug your child, or the one that we went to. If they came up to make contact with you, you had to show the supervisor your hands like this way and hug them backwards, right? But no touching. And so, because these are they made allegations against you. So you would have to, give them a little hug and then say, okay, kind of redirect them, which is fine. I get it. They're doing their job. Once they did that, they still got the love that they needed. Remember, I said I was going through this for, around 12 years through family court. So as they got older and the supervision kept getting longer and longer and longer, I would have my kids for 8 hours on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Because I was like, hey, I get them every other weekend. I'll take those weekends, but I want them 8 hours at a time. I would pay it. It cost me about $2,000 on a weekend just to see my kids. Now, just so you know, and anyone watching this, I would recommend not doing that. If you could just do an hour of supervision more frequently, will be better than big periods of time with a lot of just, playing games or whatever. What really makes alienation stick is not the time that you spend with them, but the frequency of time. So whether it's a FaceTime call, whether it's, supervision for an hour 2 times or 3 times a week will help fight alienation more than every first, third, and fifth weekend for 8 hours on one day. Let that be mindful for anyone going through this. My kids didn't get affected by it until they took my children away from me. So even through all this, I was still being, I could go through supervision, and they always gave me my kids back, because once it was ruled out, I would go through the hoops, they'd give me my kids back, and then nothing would really happen until we were trying to get to final trial. Every time we got to a final trial or something like that, or she got mad, there would be another false accusation. But what did affect them is when they took them away from me for a 3-month period where there was no contact. That single event, they came back super changed. Even the first 10 years of this stuff never changed them a bit, because it was constant contact. That one period of time, that one event that they took them away, they came back diagnosed with things, like depression, anxiety, stuff like that. And it was the no contact that did it. It will really break any child within 30 days, and they were away for 90 days. So literally it probably took 90 days for them to break my children. But since then, I got them back. So it did affect them. And so I would tell any alienator that is watching this, you have to love your children more than you hate your ex, because if you don't, you may be hurting your ex, but that's an adult. This is a child, and you're going to do this to them, and they have to live the rest of their life with what you've done to them. And in the end, they're probably going to hate you for it once they realize what you've done.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said. It doesn't just ruin a childhood, it can destroy a person. A person. Do you think you could say a little bit more about the 30 days and where that comes from, and, or who is discovering that?
I've read so many things and talked to so many people. If I was guessing, it was either probably Jennifer Harmon or Dr. Warshak that had said something about the 30 days that will break a child, that they basically give up hope is what happens.
Oh, that's like a knife in my heart. That is so relatable, the 30 days. That's why I'm so curious about it, because that's what it was like. It was a mourning process, and then you just have to extremely compartmentalize everything.
So was it like your father was dead to you, almost like that you wanted to hate him so much? Because I think that's what kids understand as a child. But anyway, I'll let you say it.
I don't, it's hard for me to explain. I had written him off. I guess that's the best way to put it. I wrote him off, but I truly believed this entire time that he didn't love me, that he had narcissistic personality disorder, couldn't feel empathy. These are all things I was made to believe. But now that I've learned the truth, it's like the love is just there again. It's like I'm accessing that love again, and it's almost as if I'm, this 7 or 8-year-old kid again. So can you walk me through how it came to a head with your story and how you were able to essentially get things resolved with your kids, get your kids back?
Yeah, I exhausted all my resources, and they knew that. And we're going into final trial again. When we're going into final trial, the last time, they knew they had exhausted all my resources. In fact, I couldn't pay for supervision or anything like that. We're almost into final trial, and then another allegation came up, and they said this was a new allegation. If I would have known that it was old allegations being revisited, that's what parents going through this also need to understand. If you're going through this and there's more than one allegation, they're bringing that up again with CPS or anything else, you need to tell the family court that this is old allegations being revisited. When you say that exact phrase, they understand that it's the same stuff that they had talked about before. And even if they're trying to get a protective order, restraining order, then if I would have understood any of these terms and said that exact phrase, they never would have done multiple protective orders, restraining orders, if I would have just said these are old allegations being revisited.
Wow, that's kind of scary how one little phrase can change so much. But that's good for parents to know that are listening.
Yes. Before I got my kids back, I actually did a video, and it was a GoFundMe because at this point I was already tens of thousands of dollars in debt to the home study, the amicus attorney, my attorney. And so I did a GoFundMe, but they still hadn't given me my kids back. And I also wanted to put it out there what this family court was doing, because I'd been silent all these years. I put this video out, we put it on Dad Talk Today, and it got over 400,000 views, like within a week. The court pulled me in on trying to gag me. My attorney was like, hey, he has a First Amendment right, freedom of speech. You can't do this. You can throw him in jail, but when he gets out, you're going to see the next video he puts. So the judge is like, well, you're going to be in here later. Just understand, I'm not going to gag you. And I don't even know why she said it, because she can't gag me. I have a freedom of speech. You cannot gag somebody. So I left the video up and went forward with it. Then they tried to pull me in there and have the amicus attorney was trying to get me to do her lawyer fees as child support. That way they knew I was out of money. If I wasn't going to pay those, then they could throw me in jail for non-payment of child support. It's illegal in Texas to rule attorney's fees as child support, but they do it unless you cite those exact rules telling them that they can't do it. Now, this is very important also for people to understand. There's a reason that whenever you go into court and they say, Smith versus Smith says da-da-da-da-da, Your Honor, and you can't do this, this, or this, or that we're able to do this because of this, this, and this, right? This, and they cite the case law. That's why if you don't cite the case law that counters whatever they're citing that says that they can have the attorney's fees as child support, then the judge will rule that they can because you didn't cite the other case. Even though the judge knew it was wrong, on the record, it shows that you didn't rebut that with case law.
So you can break the law if you don't point out the laws.
Correct. It's free for all, basically. My own judge knew that she couldn't rule this child support, right? She said, okay, well, you're right. I can rule this way, even though there were cases that I looked up later that she had ruled on that they brought up the case law. And so at that point, my attorney knew she was about to rule on it, was like, no, this is not okay, Your Honor. In fact, this versus this says that you cannot legally do this, and they can't legally ask for it, knowing that this is illegal in Texas.
So they were banking on the chance that you and your lawyer didn't know about this precedent.
Yep.
This is way worse than I could have imagined.
Oh, yeah. If you think about it, why does a judge sitting on a bench need to have attorneys tell them that about any case law? This is a judge.
Right.
Why would you have to come in here and tell me about case law when I'm a judge presiding over this? And a lot of attorneys twist it. They'll use something else that means nothing else, but because the other attorney's not familiar with that case law or whatever, the judge rules in their favor.
No way.
100%. We can show you cases that happens all the time. Your attorney has to be on their toes.
This is really scary.
And I can guarantee you, once this interview hits, you're going to see a bunch of people saying, this is what happened to me. I have the transcript 100%. This has happened to me. This happened to me. And that's what happened when I posted that video of me asking for, the GoFundMe to just get into family court to finish this. There were thousands of responses. This is happening to me. This has happened to me. At that point, that's when we knew that this was more serious than what it is. And that's when Eric and I, with Dad Talk Today, ended up hitting the road and doing a bunch of stuff and going and talking to state legislators and all over the country, because this is an epidemic.
I mean, and who would know all of that? Who would know all of that right off the top of their head?
I have people that I help in my own support group and stuff that have me talk to their attorneys, and their attorneys are writing with, like, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this. I didn't know this. I didn't know this. I'm like, you went to law school. I didn't go to law school. Like, how did you not know this? And they're just like, wow, this is crazy.
Almost who can be the better manipulator, it sounds like.
Pretty much. We have court watchers that go in there, and once they know that there's other people watching, then they either won't let the court watchers in. Now, if it's a judge that doesn't know about it and they let the court watchers in, then all of a sudden the judge realizes why the court watchers are there. And it's funny, I'll send you a video. There's a judge that we were all court watching, and the judge let everybody in. She was like, why are all these people in here? You could see her going like, I thought this was a divorce. And the opposing counsel was like, Judge, these are court watchers that are in here. They're from Dad Talk Today and all these other groups, and they're in here just court watching, and they want to record this and post it later and make us look like whatever. And the judge is like, well, you can't record this, whatever. And then the judge, we've even had them recuse themselves because the judge knows that if they violate something and there's 100 court watchers in there, all of a sudden you have 100 people filing with the state board because you did something wrong. And it's different than me as a one person writing the state board and saying whatever. Now you have 100 people in there saying the same thing, and the judge can get sanctioned. They can lose their position, all kinds of stuff.
Wow.
Themselves.
Can court watchers, I'm not really familiar with the term, or can it be any layperson?
It can. Anybody can court watch. We actually have a group strictly for that. And so we give, like if we're on Zoom, you give them the Zoom link. But let me caution you, judges hate it. But in the US, there's actually law on it that the court shall remain open. You can't record it. So if you're found doing that, then the judge can do whatever they want. But the court shall remain open. So if you're on a Zoom call, then people should be able to come in and see that like you're having it in person and being able to come to the courthouse. They can't keep you out of it as long as you're not one of the litigants or one of the people that are going to testify. Because people that testify in a court case cannot be in the courtroom while it's going on.
Right. So this what you've just told me about court watching and how it was affecting the judge makes me wonder if family court should be televised.
I think so. Like the Johnny Depp case. What was so bad? That didn't hurt anybody. They televised it. But they had to get the judge's permission and everybody else's permission to do it. But yes, 100%. Judge Judy. I love Judge Judy. If you watch any of hers, that woman is ruthless. Like, she doesn't care who the attorney, well, it's pro se litigants in her thing, but literally, it's crazy how the demeanor of a judge changes when there's court watchers.
Wow. This is just getting like thicker and thicker into the weeds. My goodness. So the bill, how did you decide to create this bill?
So in my case, I went through family court for about 12 years. And each time that they ruled the CPS allegation out. I was trying to get my time back. I was like, okay, judge, I missed, 2 months with my kids. And, now you're giving them back to me. Can I have that time back? And the judge is like, no, we're just going to move forward. It's water under the bridge. We took them away on precaution. Here's your children back. Enjoy the time you have with them. Done. There was no penalty for my ex doing this. And in fact, it was a rewarding her by not giving me my time back. I didn't know this, but after researching it and seeing my 14th Amendment rights for care, custody, and control of children, I realized pretty soon that they're violating my constitutional rights as a parent on a precaution. And not only can they fix that by giving me my time back, they actually added insult to injury by not giving me my time back and violated it twice when they had the chance to fix it. This happened every time. And I didn't think that was okay. So after going through all this and seeing how the system works and everything, I came up with the time taken, time back bill. Eric Carroll and I went to testify in front of different judiciary committees in 43 states, somewhere around there. During COVID, we flew to Washington, drove here, drove there. We just hit the ground running to talk about family court and everything else. And so we found out that it fell on deaf ears. When we're about to do we found out we were going to do a documentary, and we found out that one of the people in our group had just been murdered. His name was John Mast. He had just happened that evening, and one of his sisters had called Eric and told him about it. And so we jumped on a plane immediately the next day. We got all of our gear. We said, okay, let's go see what's going on. We covered that. That was a documentary, I Stand With John. But when that documentary hit, about an hour long on YouTube, and it's free, we got so many views and so much comments on it that we found out a lot of people were going through this also. And so something had to be done with false allegations. So when I was going through this and I found out about what I needed to do for the bill, we went to Ted Cruz, Donald Trump. We interviewed a ton of people about, state legislators, everybody else. And what we ended up finding out when we went to all these higher up politic people is that they said, well, if you want to change it on a state level, you have to go to your state senators and House reps because they're the ones that make bills. We even went to the Texas Attorney General and talked to him about it. All these people, even Donald Trump, were like, we can't do anything about this. You have to go to these other people to do it, change laws. So I went to my state senator, Angela Paxton, and I proposed this bill to her. Now, this is very important for people that are wanting to change laws. If you're going to do this, you have to go to your state legislators and have a problem. And with that problem, you have to have a solution. If you don't have a solution, do not go there, because all you're going to do is emotionally throw up on them. They're going to forget about you as soon as you walk out, pretty much. And you're not going to get anything accomplished other than wasting your time, their time. So you have to have a solution. So when I went, I could point out the problem. I can point out the solution. And she was like, this is amazing. You're actually giving the resources back to all these different CPS, the family court, or, the family court system. You're unstopping it with one law. She was like, are you a lawyer? And I was like, no. And she was like, well, how did you get to this point? And then I went through the whole story. And by the end of it, she was like, we have to do this. And then she went with the bill and proposed it. It went through the Senate unopposed, and it went through the House unopposed. Not one person could oppose it, because now you have to be very careful with this too, because I had a lot of people telling me, well, you should have put in that bill that, the person making the false allegation should go to jail or a fine or something like that. Had I done that, they never would have passed my bill, because they're never going to pass a bill that will stop someone from reporting if a child is being hurt. And if I would have put that in there, that's what would have happened, and it would have killed the bill. Now, the other part to that is they're like, well, why don't you put that it's retroed, and then it would affect my case too. I would have got 3 years of time back with my kids. I didn't do that either, because that would have stopped some of the people, because I would have stopped up the court system with people trying to get their time back. And so that would have defeated the purpose. Right now, the statistics for CPS is that only 18% of all CPS allegations in the US are able to determine that there are reason to believe that something happened. That means the rest of them are probably false. That tells you that CPS is fighting mostly people in family court. Now, the other thing that told me that too was whenever you call CPS, the first thing that they asked was, the child that you're reporting, is the family in family court or going through a divorce? Not is the child okay, not whatever. The first question they ask you, is this family going through family court?
Why do you think that is?
Are mostly allegations, and they're using CPS and wasting those resources as a weapon. The time taken, time back bill will give those resources back to CPS to be able to actually look into cases where children are being hurt rather than false allegations.
It's an incredible law. I can see exactly why you wouldn't want to punish them with jail time or financial retribution, but this makes sense. This time taken, time back makes sense. How does this work logistically? If you have your kids taken from you for 3 months, do you get immediately 3 months with your kids straight? Or how does that work?
Yeah, so the time wasn't really 3 months with your kids. The time was every first, third, and fifth weekend or whatever else that you had. So the time that you were given to you in your decree that they took away while the investigation was going, that's the time that you get taken, that's the time you get back.
Okay, so you would get those extra weekend. Right. Okay.
So now you have not only your weekends, but let's just say you had every first, third, and fifth weekend. Now you're going to supersede their weekends for 2 months because now you're going to see them every weekend. So you're going to have them first, second, third, fourth, fifth, first, second, third, fourth, fifth. So every weekend, Friday to Monday, is now yours.
Awesome.
And so it deters the alienator from that behavior. The time taken, time back bill was like an atomic bomb, basically, because it was such a pretty bill that anybody trying to oppose it, there was no retro, so it's not going to stop up anything. There was no penalty for people making false allegations. It just stops the behavior because it doesn't reward you making the allegation.
It's brilliant. It really is. First, let me back up. How long did it take from the conception of the law to getting the law passed?
It took only 6 months, basically, from start to finish on my time taken, time back bill to get it passed through. That's less than most of us spend in family court.
I don't know much about legislation, but that seems very fast.
It was very fast. In fact, everybody I talked to, so I went and talked to Ted Cruz's office, John Cornyn's office, all these people, and they're like, you did what? They're like, it was your first bill? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, and it was unanimous in the House and the state state senators' offices. And I was like, yeah, it went through the Senate and the House unopposed. They were like, that's unheard of. Like, nobody does that. It's going to change how things are done. And so I could have threw my judge under the bus and got retaliation by taking and overturning hers, but I let it go and ended up doing it for the better of humanity, I guess. And that was more to me meaningful and my children and 30 million other Texans than just overturning my case and getting retaliation over my judge.
Oh yeah, for sure. I imagine it must be much more fulfilling.
Took all that pain and I turned it into a purpose. And I feel that everyone should do this that is going through this. You take all that pain that you're going through and you figure out a way to change what's going on. Because what I did with that bill is I took the discretion away from every judge in Texas. They now do not have that discretion. As soon as CPS rules that out, you get that time back automatically and the same type of time. If it was a weekend, you get those weekends until that's given back, or if they hijacked your Christmas, your Thanksgiving, or any of that stuff.
So now you're working on getting this passed at a national level, right?
Correct. And that's something else I want to talk about, because this was pretty important. And this is kind of what makes me think it was a God thing, because it went through the Senate and the House unopposed. And then when our governor got to it, he could either veto it, and he vetoed over 70-something bills. So even if they went through the House and the Senate, he still vetoed over 70-something bills this session. When it got to him, he could have not signed it, and it would have went through. But if he believes in the bill, then he signs off on it. He signed off on it on Father's Day. And so that, sorry,
Don't apologize.
that alone, just, it was almost a gift for going through all this, to give fathers that gift of the time taken, time back, where the judges do not have the discretion anymore.
It's amazing. It's amazing what you've done. I don't know if I would have had it in me to keep going and to change this for other people too. And that's taking your pain and making a purpose out of it. I respect that so much. I can't thank you enough for what you're doing. You've had such incredible success. I hope this is just the beginning of your journey. How have people in your life reacted since you've begun speaking out about all of this?
There's a Bible quote, and I'm no prophet by any way, but I was in church one day, and our pastor was talking about that, this Bible quote, and it's that you're a prophet to everyone but your family. And basically it kind of makes sense that, you know, even let's just say the pastor himself, and that's I think what he was talking about, is that his family looks at him different than everyone else of what he's doing, the congregation and whatever. They look up to him, whatever. And so don't get me wrong, my family loves me. They're behind me. You can go on my Facebook page. You can see us all together. We have fun. I have daddy-daughter dates with my daughters and stuff like that. Like, I've been doing that since they were little. My family's supportive of it, don't get me wrong, but they went through it with me. And I can probably tell you that as you're going through this yourself, that at some point your husband's gonna be like, oh my gosh, Maddie, like, are you still like, you know, kind of talking about this? Yeah. But it's perfect. And I get it, you know. And so don't let it, all I can tell people is don't let it consume your life and turn your pain into purpose. But you also need your family there. And so give them a break sometimes. In fact, I'm here by myself. My family's over there in Colombia. I mean, I'm in Colombia right now, but my family's like a couple of houses down all together. And, you know, but they are supportive of this. 100% they are. But, you know, I'm still dad to them. I'm still my wife's husband. And so I mean, they understand that it's an amazing thing, but they're like, okay, like, you know, my family loves me and they're supportive, but I don't think that they realize the impact that, you know, us talking or getting the awareness out is making in this community, or the importance of it.
Can I tell you something? I feel the same exact way about what I've been doing and with my family, and that includes everybody in my family, whether it's siblings, my husband, even my dad. I think there's just a level of separation, a degree of separation between what everybody thinks I've been through and what I've actually been through, and how important it is to me, because I know there are millions of children out there right now going through the same thing. And it's the destruction that it leaves on the person's identity, psyche, you know, attachment systems, everything. It'll play out for decades. I mean, it's not just, you know, you take the kid to therapy and they work through it. Like, no, this will leave resounding effects even on their kids and their kids. Like, the trauma can't be quantified. And I think you know that. I think I know that. And I think that's why, you know, my family's over there watching a Christmas movie right now, and I'm in here interviewing you, and your family's down the street, and you're here talking, because we have been personally affected by this in such a way that you become hopeless. There are moments where you feel so totally alone. I don't know, maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, but
That's correct.
It is so powerful to realize that it's not personal. It is a bigger issue. I just feel so grateful that you have given me this time tonight to talk and share this really, really valuable information with a lot of people who are going to be watching.
Even when my child asks questions or whatever, I could have taken that time to badmouth my ex, but I didn't because they still had to go home to that home. If they thought I was a monster and they were safe in their other home, even though I know I just sent them back home to a monster, and they would not get a good night's rest, at least they had one parent that they knew nothing about that was bad. And I just took all that hate and that anger and everything else and just ate it, basically. And it made me at peace knowing that they went home and felt safe, rather than me explaining to them that it wasn't me that was the monster, it was the other person. And then you would have them conflicted in both homes and they would never have peace. A lot of people will commit suicide as soon as this starts happening. And I've known several people in support groups that come in and can't deal with it, because when you make an allegation like a silver bullet that you've molested someone, you lose your job, you lose your family, you lose everything all at once. And most people don't have the capacity to handle that, especially if you don't know who you are and you are whoever your job is. Something, or if you're so enmeshed with your family that was, your life, you take that away from someone, you take everything away. And don't get me wrong, there were times that I thought all kinds of things, hurtful things to myself, to my ex, to everything, or attorneys, or the court, all kinds of stuff, but do not act on them. It's natural to think about them, but not to act on them. So no matter what you're going through, you need support, find a support group, whether it's the Dad Talk Today support group or anybody else's groups, or your project's amazing. Maddie, what you are going to do in your lifetime to change what's going on in these court systems, you don't even realize yet. I'm telling you,
so.
A huge difference. You are making a huge difference.
Thank you. I'll end with my conclusion. I have two last questions. And the first is, if you had to pick the four most important things that would fix the family court, what would they be?
I actually wrote the four things down. So one night I was just sitting around thinking, because kind of like the bill came to me one night at like 4 a.m.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't know if you're like this, but literally it never fails. At 4 a.m., I come up with the most crazy things, or it's almost like I wake up and I have to write this stuff down. And so the four things I came up with that will end this is prosecution for perjury is number one. If they will just prosecute for perjury, it's already a law. You don't have to make up another law. As long as the district attorney's office and the judges will prosecute for perjury, 90% of this will end. Another thing that will do it, but it's going to have to get passed, is 50-50 equal parenting in every state. That will stop 100% of this pretty much, unless they're just nuts. Because at that point, there's no gifts and prizes at the end. You're not taking the kids, you're not getting child support. So there's no reason for women or men to leave the marriage if there's no gifts and prizes. So as long as you take the gifts and prizes away and there is no child support because you both support the child equally in both homes, then there's really no reason for divorce, and it will actually keep the nuclear family together. The other thing that's going to help this cause is cameras in the courtroom. And so if you do cameras in the courtroom, you don't need court watchers. You don't need any of this stuff. The cameras will make the judges fix themselves. Cops have body cams. Courts already have cameras in the courtroom because they're recording what's going on. There's already cameras in the courtroom. You have to release those to the litigants. Now, the reason that the judges are getting by with this is because they're like, well, there's sensitive information being said in here. Okay, so don't release it unless it's to one of the litigants or their attorneys. Problem solved. So the cameras in the courtroom are a big one, and no immunity for judges. So prosecute for perjury, 50-50 in a no-fault divorce, cameras in the courtroom, and no immunity for judges. Those four things will obliviate the family court system without having to reform it, without having to do anything. Those four laws in every state will obliviate the family court system and clean it up. My idea, and what I think should happen, is that it's kind of like the time taken, time back bill. You make it so pretty that nobody can argue it. So what you do is you make both parents pay child support. whether it's 50, even in a 50-50 shared parenting arena. That way they can't say that it's a bunch of crying dads or somebody that doesn't want to pay child support. You both pay child support. So if both are paying 20% for one child, then the money is actually getting offset on the other side to the person to the household that really needs it. Does that make sense?
No, you lost me.
So if you and your husband get divorced right now and you have two children, right?
Mm-hmm.
For one child, you pay 20, or he'll pay 20%. For two children, it's 25%. So let's just say he has to pay $1,000 a month on what he makes, and you have to pay $500 a month on what you make. Is 25% of your income. So he sends his 1,000 to the Attorney General. You send your 500 to the Attorney General, and then it gets sent to you all. Basically, you're only getting 500 a month because you just sent 500 over there.
Is that getting rid of the money going to the state?
No.
So you think that should stay?
Let me explain it differently, because this is super important, and I think people should know this. Okay, so I'll rewind. So in a 50-50 shared parenting state, I think, so the states can't say that they don't want it in their state. This, I think, will help the states pass it because they make money on the money being sent in for child support. Is that both parents pay, if it's 20% for one child, 25% for two children, because it offsets the amount that each one's paying. So let's just say if you both make the same amount of money every month, and so you have to pay 1,000, he has to pay 1,000. You both pay in 1,000 to your state, and they send y'all the checks. The state still makes double the money from federal funding for collecting. Now they're collecting double the money, so it's state incentivized for them to pass 50-50.
Oh.
But if you're paying 1,000 and he's paying 1,000, really nobody's paying any money. Nothing out of your pocket, nothing out of him, but the state is actually making double the money that it would. So it incentivizes the state to pass child support because now it's double the money in their pocket.
I know that if you withhold the child from the parent, the less time they have with the child, the more child support they have to pay. Is that correct? How can that be decentivized?
So the way that they say it is that the less time that a child spends with the other parent, then that parent that has the child spends more money on them, right? For school, clothes, food. They just use resources. So that parent, because that parent has less time, they need to pay more child support to the parent that has more time. Again, it's that law that's supposed to help, but it doesn't. In fact, what it did was, once the state saw that they were making more money on making that parent pay more because they were getting a percentage also kickback from that government Title 40 funding, the less time that they gave that parent is why it offset. But if you do 50-50, even if it's not 50-50, if it's 60-40, you still pay 20%. Like I said, you make both parents pay the same amount. It disincentivizes getting divorced.
Wait, I think I'm understanding now. So there's a check coming to my bank account for $1,000 and a check going to the husband's bank account for $1,000. So it's equaling out the money, but then the state is getting double of the kickback.
Correct. So
so this should pass with flying colors then, because all they care about is money, right? Like they should pass.
So now the state's incentivized double what it's making, instead of giving one parent less and subjecting a child to less time with one parent. So there's a statistic out there that shows that if one parent has less than 35% with that child, then basically that child is at risk for alcoholism, drug abuse, teen pregnancy, high school dropout with 35%. If you look at what standard possession is in most states, the courts right now for the last 50 years have been sentencing our children to be high risk for all those things. And that's why we're seeing the problems that we have already now. But if you incentivize the state and you make both people pay, don't get me wrong, I would rather have nobody pay child support and do 50-50. But if the state, if it's going to pass the law, then pass the law, incentivize the state. You both pay 20% or 25% for two children, but you still be able to be in that child's life and give them the best possible start to not be at risk.
That's brilliant. You're playing the state's game, but you're also getting what's best for the kid. I just want to end by asking you, your kids, as they grow up, I'm sure will learn more and more about your story and about this law and your crusade and how you've fought tooth and nail over a decade for your relationship with them, because that's how much you love your kids. I was wondering, what do you hope that they take away from your legacy?
If they come across this video at any point, I don't think that there's anything that they don't know. They know that I fought tooth and nail for them. They know that I changed the law, not asking for anything in return. It's a hard question. I think they'll see the advocacy that not only me or you or all these other advocates doing, and the court system is actually breeding advocates like us because of what they did. If they were more fair, there wouldn't be advocates. There would be no reason for them. They're the ones that are breeding what they're about to reap. I think in that they know I love them and that I would do anything for them. You should get a court order, throw it in a drawer, and co-parent. That's what you should do. The court order is only there if you can't resolve something. Most people go by court orders thinking that's the solution. That's not the solution. In fact, that'll cause more arguments and more trouble. Throw it in a drawer and co-parent. And even to this day, that's what I try doing 100% of the time.
Wow. Your daughters are really lucky, really, really lucky to have you. And I don't think they'll ever doubt that. How can people follow you on your mission, your advocacy, and your legislative efforts? How can they stay in touch with you and stay up to date with your endeavors?
So Dad Talk Today support group. So there's Dad Talk Today, and then there's Dad Talk Today support group. Dad Talk Today support group is a group that I run, helping people going through this, just starting out. And there's a lot of advocates in there. There's lawyers in there. There's therapists in there that are free that will help people that are in crisis or anything else. There's people in there that will help you if you're pro se, stuff like that. It's a great group. You can follow me on Facebook. I don't have a lot of different media outlets. That takes so much time. So kudos to you for doing all the different things that you do. I'm sure you'll cut some of these up in reels and whatever else, which is great. I think there needs to be more 30-second reels of some of these pieces of gold that you're pulling out. And I think you're doing an amazing job. So Facebook, and then I have a personal Facebook, Robert Garza. You can search me.
Awesome. Is there any way that people can support you and your work?
Just by following and stuff. I'm still paying all my stuff back, so I would love donations and stuff like that. But I think they're better used in fighting your own battles. And so for that, I won't ask for any. But if there's donors out there that want to see this changed on a state level I'm changing on a state level already. And that's coming out of my own pocket. But on a national level, I found that I'm going to need quite a bit of resources. And so if there's donors out there that want to do something on a national level, absolutely reach out to me, or reach out to you to reach out to me, whichever one they can do, because some people aren't internet savvy. And at that point, with money, I could absolutely change nationwide legislation. But I'm still, like I said, I'm still paying back, my own attorneys and stuff like that. But I think the parents that are going through this need their own resources. Mm-hmm. So please keep those in your pocket. But if there is someone that is out of this that is on a different level, absolutely.
Well, you might get some interest. You never know. Thank you so much for your time. I can't thank you enough for not only your time in this interview, but all of your efforts and what you've done with your experience is truly remarkable.
Thank you. Oh, one more thing. Go out and watch a new movie that's coming out. It's a new documentary called We the Parents. And it has me in it and several other people that have gone through this. And I think you'll get a lot of pieces of gold, and it explains why what's happening to you is happening to you. It shouldn't be happening to you 100%, but at least you'll get the peace of mind that you're not in this alone.
Thank you for that.
There's so much things that people need to understand and need to know that we can't cover in an hour. I mean, there's just way too much stuff. So.
I know. And I think I've already, it's been 2 hours. I've taken up 2 hours.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry.
No, I'm sorry, but I'll just say thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time, and we'll probably look forward to a part 2 because there's so much to discuss.